I still remember the exact moment Daniel asked me to go with him. It wasn't dramatic or planned. We were sitting in a small coffee shop near my apartment, the kind of place where no one rushes you out and the windows are always fogged up, even on clear days. He stirred his coffee slowly, then looked up and said, almost casually, "I'm thinking of taking a short mountain trip this weekend. Just to breathe. You want to come?" At first, I laughed it off. A mountain trip sounded nice, but my life wasn't exactly simple at that time. I was in a relationship, on paper at least. Ryan and I had been together for almost 3 years. From the outside, we looked stable. Same apartment, same routine, same shared jokes. But inside, something had gone quiet. Conversations had turned into updates, affection into habit. We lived together, yet I often felt alone. Daniel knew all of this, at least parts of it. We had met a year earlier through mutual friends, and somehow he had become the person I talked to when I didn't know how to explain my feelings to anyone else. He was calm in a way that made people open up. He listened without interrupting, without trying to fix things. That made him dangerous in a way I didn't fully understand yet. "I don't know," I said, staring at my cup. "Ryan might not like it." Daniel shrugged gently. "It's just a trip. Fresh air. No noise. You've been saying you're tired." He was right. I was tired, not physically, but emotionally. Tired of pretending everything was fine. Tired of pushing down thoughts that came up late at night when Ryan was asleep beside me, facing the other direction. Still, guilt settled in my chest immediately. Even considering the trip felt like a small betrayal. That night, I brought it up with Ryan. I tried to sound casual, like it didn't matter either way. He barely looked up from his phone. "Yeah, sure," he said. "Have fun. Just text me when you get there." There was no jealousy in his voice. No curiosity. That hurt more than I expected. The next 2 days passed slowly. I packed and unpacked my bag twice, unsure why I was so nervous. It wasn't like I was doing anything wrong, I told myself. Friends go on trips together all the time. Still, a quiet voice inside me kept asking why this felt different. Early Saturday morning, Daniel picked me up. The city faded behind us as the road narrowed and the buildings turned into trees. Music played softly, then stopped. We didn't rush to fill the silence. It felt natural, like we didn't need noise to justify our presence. As the mountains rose around us, something in my chest loosened. The air felt cleaner, sharper. Daniel smiled more out there, like the space gave him permission to breathe. We talked about small things at first, work, random memories, places we wanted to see someday. Nothing heavy, nothing risky. But even then, I noticed how easy it was to be myself around him. I didn't have to perform or explain. I didn't feel like I was asking for too much just by being present. That realization scared me. When we finally arrived at the cabin, the world felt very far away. No neighbors, no traffic, no constant buzzing of phones. Just trees, mountains, and a silence that felt honest. Daniel unlocked the door and stepped aside, letting me go in first. It was a small gesture, but it stayed with me. As I stood there, looking out of the mountains through the wide window, a thought crossed my mind when I tried hard to push away. This trip wasn't just about rest. It was about something I'd been avoiding for a long time. The truth about what I was missing and who I was becoming. I didn't know it yet, but agreeing to that trip had already changed something inside me. The first night in the mountains felt unreal, like we had stepped outside of time. After unloading the car, we made a simple dinner together, moving around the small kitchen without getting in each other's way. Outside, the sky slowly darkened, and the mountains turned into quiet shadows. There was no signal on our phones, and, for once, that didn't make me anxious. It felt like permission to disappear for a while. We ate at the small wooden table near the window. The cabin lights were soft, almost warm, and the silence between us didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt earned. Daniel talked about his childhood, about growing up in different places, and never really staying long enough to feel rooted. I found myself listening closely, not just to his words, but to the pauses between them. "I think that's why I like places like this," he said, gesturing toward the dark outline of the trees outside. "They don't ask anything from you." That line stayed with me. Back home, everything asked something from me. My job, my relationship, even my friends. Expectations were everywhere, pressing down quietly. Here, there was nothing to prove. Later, we stepped outside with mugs of hot tea. The air was cold and sharp, and the stars looked unreal, scattered across the sky in a way I'd never seen from the city. We stood side by side, looking up, not talking much. I felt small in a good way, like my problems didn't own the entire universe. That night, I lay awake longer than I expected. The cabin creaked softly, settling into the cold. My thoughts kept drifting back to Ryan. I wondered what he was doing, whether he missed me at all. Then I felt guilty for wondering that while lying a few feet away from someone else who made me feel strangely calm. I turned onto my side and stared into the dark, aware of a quiet tension growing inside me. The next morning, we woke early. Sunlight poured through the window, lighting up the room in soft gold. Daniel was already up, standing outside on the porch, breathing in the air like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. We ate breakfast quickly and decided to go for a hike before the trails got busy. The path was narrow and uneven, winding through tall trees and over small streams. As we walked, our conversation slowly deepened. Without the distractions of daily life, there was nowhere to hide. I told him things I hadn't said out loud before, about feeling invisible in my own relationship, about how I sometimes wondered if staying felt easier than being honest. Daniel listened quietly, not judging, not interrupting. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "That's a heavy thing to carry alone," he said. His words hit harder than I expected. I realized then how rarely anyone had acknowledged my feelings without trying to explain them away. We stopped walking for a moment, standing on a ridge overlooking the valley below. The view was wide and open, and something about it made honesty feel unavoidable. That I didn't say anything else, but I didn't need to. The silence between us held more meaning than words. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen, not as someone's partner, not as a role I was supposed to play, but as myself. That realization scared me. I knew I was crossing into dangerous territory, even if nothing physical had happened. Emotionally, I was leaning somewhere I shouldn't. I thought of Ryan again and felt a knot tighten in my stomach. I didn't want to hurt him. I didn't want to be the kind of person who betrays trust. Even quietly, on a hike back, Daniel walked a little ahead of me. I watched him move through the trees, steady and unhurried. I wondered if he felt the same shift I did, or if this was something happening only inside me. Part of me wanted to ask, to bring it into the open. Another part was afraid of what the answer might change. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, I realized something important. This trip wasn't just about escape. It was showing me the gap between who I was pretending to be and who I actually was. And once you see a gap like that, you can't unsee it. That I didn't know what I would do with that truth yet. I only knew that when I eventually went back home, nothing would feel exactly the same again. By the time I accepted what was happening, it had already become part of my routine. The messages, the late conversations, the shared silences that said more than words ever could. It felt strange how easily something secret could slide into everyday life. Coach Harris and I became careful. Too careful. In public, we kept our distance. On the field, he treated me like everyone else, sometimes even harder, as if discipline could erase what existed between us. But in private, the connection only deepened. That we met less often at his house and more in quiet, ordinary places that drew no attention. A short walk after evening practice. Sitting in our cars a little longer before leaving. Conversations that started with sports and drifted into things that felt far too personal. He talked about choices he'd made years ago, about how life had turned out differently than he imagined. I listened, feeling both honored and burdened by his trust. Sometimes he'd stop mid-sentence and shake his head like he was pulling himself back from a place he wasn't supposed to go. I started lying to people I cared about. Small lies at first. Where I'd been. Who I talked to. Those lies piled up faster than I expected, each one making the next easier. The secrecy made everything feel more intense, more real, even as it chipped away at my peace of mind. There were moments when I wanted him to say it out loud, to name what was growing between us. Other times I was terrified he might. Living in that in-between state was exhausting, like holding my breath for weeks at a time. One night, we sat in his car, parked on a quiet street. The engine was off, the windows fogged slightly from the cold air outside. He stared straight ahead, hands gripping the steering wheel. "This isn't fair to you," he said quietly. The words sent a jolt through me. "What do you mean?" He exhaled slowly. "I should know better. You're at the start of your life. I'm not." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him that I chose this, that I wasn't as naive as he thought. Instead, I stayed silent, afraid that speaking would break something. He turned to look at me, and for a moment, it felt like the rest of the world disappeared. No coach, no player, just two people standing too close to something dangerous. "I care about you," he said. The sentence landed softly but carried weight. I could feel in my chest that my heart raced. I nodded, unsure if my voice would hold steady. "I care about you too." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't dramatic, but it was enough to change everything. After that, the pull between us became harder to ignore. I found myself structuring my days around those quiet moments together. When he was distant, I felt it immediately, like a sudden drop in temperature. Guilt followed close behind. I thought about his wife more often now, about the life she believed she was living. I wondered what kind of person I was becoming, justifying my feelings while knowing someone else would be hurt if the truth came out. There were nights I told myself I'd end it, that I'd set boundaries, step back, do the right thing. And then a message would come through, simple and sincere, and all my resolve would fade. The bond we shared existed in a fragile space, real enough to matter, hidden enough to survive only in shadows. It gave me comfort and anxiety in equal measure. Deep down, I knew this couldn't last. Secrets like ours never do. But knowing that didn't make it any easier to let go. The change didn't happen all at once. It started with small absences, messages that came later than usual, conversations that felt shorter, more cautious. At first, I told myself I was overthinking it. I'd become good at that, explaining away discomfort instead of facing it. Then, one afternoon after practice, Coach Harris called my name as I was heading toward the locker room. His voice sounded different, controlled, but strained. "Can you stay back a minute?" he asked. We stood near the empty field, the sun already dipping low, long shadows stretching across the grass. He didn't meet my eyes right away. "My wife has been asking questions," he said finally. The words hit harder than I expected. My chest tightened, a mix of fear and guilt rushing in all at once. "About what?" I asked. Even though I already knew. "About me," he said. "About where I've been, who I've been talking to." There it was. The reality I'd been avoiding. He rubbed his face, exhaustion written into every line. "I can't keep doing this, Ethan." I nodded slowly, even though part of me wanted to beg him not to say what I knew was coming. "I understand." And I did. Or at least, I thought I did. The distance between us grew quickly after that. Messages stopped. When we spoke, it was brief and strictly professional. On the field, he avoided eye contact altogether. It felt like losing someone without being allowed to grieve. That I tried to focus on my routine, on classes, on friends. But everything felt hollow. The silence he left behind was louder than any argument could have been. Late at night, I replayed our conversations, searching for signs I'd missed. I wondered if any of it had been real to him, or if I'd simply been a moment of escape from a life he felt trapped in. The doubt cut deeper than I expected. That a week later, I saw him from a distance, standing with his wife at a campus event. She laughed at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. The sight made my throat tighten. I looked away quickly, ashamed of the jealousy that rose up inside me. That was when it truly sank in. I had never been part of his real life. I had existed in the quiet corners, in the hours no one else saw. That I started blaming myself for not setting boundaries, for wanting something that could never be mine, for mistaking attention for something deeper. The guilt settled heavy on my chest, making it hard to breathe some days. One evening, my phone buzzed. His name flashed on the screen for the first time in weeks. "I'm sorry," the message read. For everything. I stared at the words, emotions crashing into each other. I typed a reply, erased it, typed again. Finally, I sent something simple: "that I hope you're okay." That was it. No confessions, no accusations, Just two people acknowledging an ending that neither of us knew how to properly name. After that, the messages stopped for good that I realized then that some connections don't end with closure. They end with distance, with unanswered questions, with lessons learned the hard way. And as painful as it was, I knew this chapter of my life was forcing me to grow, whether I was ready or not. Time has a way of softening memories without erasing their meaning. Months passed, and the intensity of what I felt slowly settled into something quieter, something I could carry without pain. Life moved forward, and so did I. I focused on my studies, my goals, and the small moments that reminded me who I was becoming. The experience with Daniel no longer felt like an open wound, but like a chapter that had taught me something important. Eventually, I heard from Daniel again. It wasn't unexpected, but it wasn't sudden either. His message was brief and thoughtful, checking in and wishing me well. There was no hint of unresolved emotion, only kindness and respect. I replied in the same tone, grateful that we could acknowledge each other without reopening old feelings. That exchange felt like closure in the truest sense. Not long after, I visited my family. Sitting across from my father at the dinner table, listening to his stories and laughter, I felt a deep sense of clarity. I understood more clearly than ever how important trust and honesty are, not just in actions, but in intentions. I didn't share my story with him. It wasn't necessary. What mattered was that I had learned to honor the relationships in my life by respecting their boundaries. As I continued to explore my identity, I did so with more confidence. The confusion I once felt had given way to acceptance. I learned that understanding who you are doesn't happen all at once. It unfolds through experiences, reflection, and sometimes difficult choices. That weekend had been one of those defining moments for me, that I also came to understand that love, in its healthiest form, never asks you to compromise your values. What I felt wasn't wrong in itself, but acting on it would have caused harm. Recognizing that difference was a sign of growth I hadn't expected for myself. In time, I met new people. Connections build on openness and equality, without secrecy or imbalance. Those relationships felt different, lighter, because they were rooted in honesty from the start. I carried the lessons from the past with me, using them to guide my choices rather than weigh me down. Looking back now, I don't regret that weekend. I respect it for what it was, a moment of emotional awakening that taught me about responsibility, restraint, and self-respect. It showed me that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is step away. Even when feelings are real, that if there's one truth I've learned, it's that growth often comes from choosing what's right over what's easy. My story isn't about scandal or secrets. It's about learning to navigate emotions with integrity. And in doing so, I found a stronger, more honest version of myself. That's why I share this story now, not to dwell on the past, but to acknowledge how it shaped me. Some connections are meant to teach us, not stay with us forever. And sometimes, letting go is the very thing that allows us to move forward with peace.